Jimbo, your role as a demonstration pilot at Embraer, what does that entail, and what's different between that and what you were doing in the corporate world?
Sure. So demonstration pilot, we're really part of the sales team really for Embraer. Obviously, we operate the aeroplane. We're still going to do things with the aeroplane, but we do several types of things. So we have pilot demos, which are done over in the United States. That's where we actually will take a non-type rated pilot up. We'll actually put them in the left-hand seat and we'll show them all about the aircraft, let them fly the aircraft, see what it's all like. We then have executive demos where we're going to put potential customers or passengers in the aircraft, and we might fly them, for example, London to Dubai to show them what the aircraft's like, what it's capable of, how comfortable it is. Also allows us to then show them the aeroplane being practically used. We have static demonstrations where we might, for example, just power the aeroplane up on the ground, get some people around, show them all the functions of the aircraft, our engineering, how we've designed it.
So you talk about the levels of likelihood someone's going to buy the plane.
Yeah, basically, yes.
About a flight to Dubai, another minute you're saying, we'll do a static demonstration. I'm thinking in my mind that means they're unlikely to buy it, but let's show it off.
Well, I guess we say, well, next thing I was going to say is the air shows, Nick. We do. When pre-COVID, of course, we were doing all the air shows. So we'd often be in an air show and we're there for the whole week. So then that's the opportunity where, one of the things I love about Embraer is it's very much a family feel company. So we're one of the few manufacturers that we open the doors to the aircraft to the general public, and anyone and everyone is allowed to have a look on board, come and experience it, see what they think of it.
Do you find yourself all over the world with this role?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly a varied role. If you enjoy travel, it's one of the best things about the job. There's certainly lots of locations to go to. So despite COVID last year, it actually ended up being a very, very busy year for us. So we were doing lots around Europe, as we commonly do in the European theatre, with both the Phenom and the Praetor. And then the back end of the year, I ended up doing an Australian sales tour. So I took the aeroplane down to Australia, was based out of Australia for 3 weeks. Then came back again, and then there was Dubai, there were transatlantics. We sold both of our demonstrators in December, so they all went home. It's been a quiet time for me. Our new demonstrator arrives in about 2 weeks' time.
So in terms of executive jets, I mean, we've just mentioned there about Embraer, sort of the Embraer versus Airbus versus Boeing. So that's obviously, we're talking there the more the airline type, which is, so for a lot of the viewers, they might not understand that there's, in aviation, we're two very different pilots, not only because now is your role at Embraer, but you've always been corporate. So you've had 1 to 12 customers on a flight, and a lot of responsibility on the operation comes down to yourself and your first officer or your captain. Whereas in my world, I get in, I'm briefed by the captain, or we share the brief, and then we go. I set the aircraft up, and then we have a fantastic team that look after the rest for us, essentially. But in the corporate world, how different is that for you stepping into this role?
Yeah, that's very true. So we've got the two sides, or several sides to Embraer. We've got the commercial side, which is what you rightly talked about, which was obviously the history of the Embraer 135, 145, and then we have the 170, 190 series, which obviously you're lucky enough to have flown both of those. Both of those were actually converted as well, and we have them in a corporate version, which was known as the Legacy 600, 650. There were a few subtle differences. I mean, probably the big one was the fuel tanks, and then actually the cabin itself, instead of being high density, like in the Lineage, for example, you've got a back bedroom, a shower, a lot of different things that make the aircraft feel very different. Commercial is is a separate unit to the executive jet side, which is what I work on. So I've always kind of been around. I enjoy that customer care side of it, and we're quite lucky because obviously, like you say, in the airlines, there's a very different feel to the relationship and CRM between a cabin and a cockpit. Whereas in the size of aircraft we're flying, there is no cockpit door. Anyone can come up and talk. And we have very much a lot more safety aspect put on us as crew, primarily because obviously if anything happens, the captain and first officer or co-captain, we are responsible therefore for the safety of everyone down the back as well, in terms of managing them, making sure they're sat down, all the loose items have been stowed. So there's probably quite a lot more workload in the corporate environment.
I sort of started to mention there sort of the Airbus versus Embraer versus Boeing in terms of Embraer are the third largest supplier. In the corporate world, where do they come? Because obviously there's a different competition. Because you've also got Cessna, you've got Pilatus, you've got so there's a whole number of different sort of players in that field.
Yeah, the way it works in the exec jet size, it really kind of runs based on aircraft size and what you're trying to achieve with your aircraft. So, for example, I think we can all agree that the creme de la creme is Gulfstream. You know, with some of the beastie aircraft they produce. You know, it's down to personal opinion. I get that. Of which the direct competitor with them really probably ends up being Bombardier with the Global Series, and a little bit into Falcon with the kind of the 7X, 8X. In terms of manufacturing numbers, I do believe Gulfstream and Textron tend to be the two big ones. Then followed by Bombardier, Embraer, and then Falcon tends to be quite low down the list. It's one of the, I mean, a stunning product, don't get me wrong, but they just sell a little bit less. So it's very much done on the aircraft size when it comes to kind of our size. So the Embraer Phenom 300, for example, now 300E is now the best-selling light jet now for 9 years in a row. And we're close to, with the Phenom 100 and the Phenom 300, we're close to over 1,000 serial numbers out there in the world.
I think Embraer have always had a knack, whether it's been from the 3.5, so the Legacies type, all the way up to even now the E2s on the 1.95. They are beautiful to look at. Like they are. Everything is so in proportion. You know, it's just everything looks right in the right place, the right shape, the right size, and certainly the beauty of it is there.
Well, the one thing is Embraer, as we like to generally tell people, is very much an engineering company. It's an engineering company that fell into aviation almost in a way. And the one thing that's really good is they built all their airplanes for airline dispatchability. And they've even carried that by clean sheeting all the executive jets and designing new executive jets from scratch. They were able to put a lot of that technology and that engineering knowledge into the product from day one. So, for example, you'll find that generally all of the wheels have got large amounts of access for hydraulic lines, for wear. Everything's very simple. All the panels on the aircraft, where there's a valve, there's an easy access panel. So you're not having to take off large amounts of other part of the aircraft to get at just one specific panel. One screwdriver does almost all of the external screws on the aircraft. So you're not having to get an engineer with various toolkits to have specialized items to do things. We've worked a lot with the technology. For example, the Embraer 190, 170 series really was a flagship aeroplane for the company because a lot of the technology they learned with the fly-by-wire in that aircraft and with the smart probes, we've taken all of that technology now and that's put into all of the executive jets. So there's a lot of sharing with all that technology that's come out of that airline reliability that now goes in to make some of the most reliable executive jets out there.
And I can believe that. I was fortunate and unfortunate enough to be able to do the two type ratings within 4 months of each other. And although there's a lot of, it's a very sensible aircraft to fly the 145 or 135, when you then step into, it felt like you were coming forward 30, 40 years when you jumped into it.
Sure.
Really did. And it was, although the logic was similar to the same, the ergonomics and as a pilot flying it, it's got a lot of automation now, which we'll come on to in a minute, but it still flies.
Everything's very well thought out. A lot of the philosophies that they've taken with the dark and quiet concept. So, for example, everything in the aircraft when it's working normally should be dark, no bells, no lights going off. All of that applies across the whole fleet, whether you get in the little Phenom 100, 300, or you jump in the big 190 that you fly day to day. It's a very good philosophy that makes a very good product and a very good company.
And just on the technological front, I mean, the fact is, so I fly in and out of London City, which to anyone watching this that may not understand, your average approach is a sort of a 3-degree glide would look something like that. Well, at London City, we come in, honestly, kind of like that as a ratio. So it's a beautiful addition to our aircraft that's a steep approach arm button, which means that we can come down at the right speed, twice as steep as in any other aircraft, and it's just it still flies so beautifully. In the event that we do have a missed approach, it tidies up and flies and disappears at 4,500 feet a minute like that. It's just, I don't know, they are fantastic.
Exactly. Once again, that philosophy gets transferred across. So we look at the Praetor. Exactly. We have that steep approach button we push. and the fly-by-wire system automatically manages the spoilers to help give us that steep descent rate into London City, which, like you say, it's absolutely magical in the way the system just handles it completely automatically to make it feel just like a conventional approach for the pilot.
So Embraer recently did the E2 tour, didn't they? They have
Yes.
the Profit Hunter, which is
yes.
I mean, with the deliveries on those. Now, when that was brought in to show in London City, am I right in saying it didn't have the steep approach?
He may not have done at that time because it was probably under the experimental nature, so it may not have had the technology in it. I mean, one of the advantages, as you'll probably know with aircraft certification, is lots of these rules an aircraft has to meet anyway. So, for example, it has to be able to show greater than 2 degrees than what it's certified for. So the aircraft, in theory, was comfortably able to do it, and they probably went ahead and did it. That's part of the fun of also being an experimental aircraft.
Well, I was going to say
aircraft that are new, we can do stuff that are a little bit more interesting.
Well, that was sort of where I was taking the next question. So, rumour has it, that there was a bit of cross control there. So again, to viewers that don't necessarily know, it's when you put the ailerons maybe to the right, and you put a bit of left rudder in, and you sort of put the aircraft again in a situation where it wants to sink as well as fly to get down that slope. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but have you been in situations on sort of when you're doing demonstrations when you're in a position where you're actually able to do some flying that goes straight back to stick and rudder, the same stuff as when you bought that 150 or you opened up your flying school?
Oh, absolutely. I'd probably say the big one that we're presented with every single day, or quite regularly, especially in the UK, crosswinds. I mean, that's the one thing we all sit there and we all learn the different techniques about how we're going to fly it. Whether we do a wing down approach, where we keep the wing into wind to help us land the aircraft, or as you see a lot of the airliners do, we fly that cramped approach, don't we, where the aeroplane's basically all offset into the wind all the way down at the last minute. Hopefully, if the pilot's any good, he uses the rudder to kick the aeroplane straight onto the runway and land. So yeah, that's probably where the aeroplane feels most like a conventional aeroplane. The fly-by-wire system, especially on the Praetors, does a lot for the pilot. Makes our life very, very easy. In fact, far too easy. To the point where sometimes we forget whether the autopilot's engaged or not because it's so stable. It's such a stable platform.
Well, sorry, Jimbo, that comes to my next question. So the level of automation in these new aircraft. So you say that the Praetor is a relatively young aircraft. You've only got a couple of hundred serial numbers out there currently. The level of automation in these aircraft, do you think it's aiding you, or like you just alluded to there, is it almost a distraction where you are double checking what's in and what's not in and what's announced and not announced?
Absolutely. It can be a massive distraction. The biggest thing we see now with pilots, and this is generic whether I think actually we look at airlines or whether we look at corporate, is understanding the automation. Now, we talk about the FMA, the flight mode annunciator. What that is, for those who don't understand, is on our avionics, at the very top of our screen, we have this little screen that basically tells us all the modes which the aircraft is in terms of navigation, in terms of vertical profile, in terms of speed management, because we have an autothrottle as well. And this is basically like the golden box that tells us everything the aircraft's doing. And it's so vital that people understand the modes and what the aircraft is doing. It's a very hard transition. If I think to when I first started flying around Citation 2s, we basically had, can you remember when cars first came out, we used to have the little Garmin sat-nav in the car. Well, basically, I had one of those in the aircraft, and that was it. Everything else was just steam-driven gauges. And it's certainly a hot topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Hot topic of conversation.
So as pilots, we've been brought up our entire way to believe that multi-crew is the safest crew, and it is in so many ways.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of conversation. EASA have now just signed off the legislation to allow single pilot ops in the future. Your experience, how do you see that panning out?
I'm going to be intrigued mainly from how it's controlled and legislated. I mean, if we look at consumer thoughts, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are driven by price point. In the corporate world, I think it's going to be very, very difficult because a lot of these aircraft are certified for 2 pilots, and I can't really see a huge change in a hurry, because if we think about the amount of technology we'd have to change to enable this on a lot of aircraft that a lot of people around the world own, I can't see it being a fast transition. I can understand with some of the newer technology and the newer airlines that may be able to be incorporated at the build. But I think we all worry because we see our jobs and our career and our future potentially at risk. What also concerns me though is I hear these conversations about having fully automated aircraft. Is you can program a computer. A computer's only good as the person that programs it or designs it in the first place. And I've yet to see any evidence, including the Tesla fully automated vehicles. There's some very interesting videos on those going around. I've yet to see anything that can actually deal with compound failures. And when I say compound failures, I mean more than one thing going wrong at a time.
You don't have to go to universities, particularly, we've got, we're two very different positions here. You've got a career that I'm actually very envious of. But also myself as an airline pilot in the right-hand seat. Neither of us went to university. Both of us have started our own businesses, and both of us have networked, got on, and met people. And so both of us are modular, and yet we've still made it here. So,
exactly.
And although, like again, you mentioned it's cyclical, so I think there will be times when modular pilots are just as popular as integrated again. I think coming out of this period, modular pilots will be looked at again. BA had just started hiring modular. I was fortunate that I came in as a direct entry pilot because I finished my time at BMI. I came across to City Flyer, and so things are looking up for modular if you want to consider it as an option.
Nick, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the key things, I like to look at the global market. I obviously get a lot of exposure with the FAA side of it, being having an American HQ. And the American market is going mad at the moment. I mean, pilots are being recalled at a phenomenal rate. The job offers that are in corporate that are available at the moment are some ridiculous six-figure salaries. There's a real demand for flight crew. And the FAA system is very much a non-integrated system.
And they've got it right. The same in Canada. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, not at all.
I think you were about to say this. You start on propellers, single engine, do some hours, do some instruction, get your IR, do some multi-engine instruction, go find a job on a King Air. Then you get on the Dash 8 or something, and then you might end up on a jet. You don't take it for granted as a pilot in this country. That's the thing.
Well, I'm a big believer in this, Nick, because people come to me, and I had it when I was a DFO. People can present me a CV, and it can have 12,000 hours on it, and you can sit there and go, "Oh, good gracious, this guy's got 12,000 hours." But if those 12,000 hours are mainly sat on a 747 on long haul flying, you can guarantee that probably about half of those are probably bunk bed hours while they've been down the back. So yeah. I like to judge a person on their experience and who they are and how they fly more than how many hours they have, because the hours does depend on the quality of those hours, and that's still true today. That's very still true today.
And that comes on to another topic, as modular pilots are networking. And we alluded to this to each other on the telephone the other day.
We did.
But it's not, so now sort of talking to pilots or, people that want to become pilots. How true would you say this is to get into a company that you want to work at as soon as possible, and that the company that your best mate in training wants to work at isn't necessarily the best company for yourself? How would you say to that statement?
Absolutely 100% true. So here's a classic example. So we talk about the flying school. A lot of my friends that went through at the same time as me all ended up in Flybe because we were at Exeter. They naturally got interviews through Exeter. In fact, I did actually have an interview with Flybe, but I was told, or they had a concern that I would probably prioritise my flight school and my business above Flybe. And to which I put my hands up and said, yeah, you're right, I would do, because that's my passion and my care. So unfortunately, I didn't get a job offer with Flybe, but I was lucky enough that because of the way I went, I fell into it, and I fell into it very much by accident. But I was aware that some of my obviously colleagues seemed to have gone off and done their own thing in their own way, and I guess I'd only ever thought of airlines. I'd never really thought of corporate or any other areas. I certainly never ever really thought of demonstration flying for a manufacturer. It just fell by pure circumstance. Yeah. I mean, it's been a stunning career as a result to date, and I cannot complain, and I love it. Would I change anything? No, I don't think I would. I've been very happy and very fortunate. It's key, like you said, people understand that they don't have to have a university education. There are lots of different opportunities and facets of aviation. One of the key things is, outside of airlines, and actually even within airlines, networking. People buy people first and everything else second, as I was told when I first started in business. But it's very true.
I mean, it's so we mentioned this earlier, when you were at Centreline, I was at the neighbouring Bristol and Wessex Airline Club in the UK. I say that every interview. And we must have somehow bumped into each other then.
Absolutely.
Because I was delivering 50 meals to Eastern Airways going through Centreline.
Yes, of course.
Hot meals every morning and evening because they had the Airbus contract. Well, I met people obviously there through Centreline, and then I met people at Eastern. Then one day, it's 4 or 5 in the morning when I'm cooking 50 hot breakfasts, and a chap walks in and he says, "Oh, what, you're in early? What's going on here? Do you have a license? What are you doing?" And I didn't know who he was, but he said to me, send me your CV when you finish your training. I thought, oh, who's that? So the next day I said, I don't mean to be rude, who are you? And he goes, oh, at the time he was chief pilot of BMI, and I thought, well,
there we go.
It's networking. It's all it's amazing what you can do, but then you don't have to all have the same network. It's not just about LinkedIn, is it? It's not about Facebook. It's about going to the edge, and you might not necessarily all get on, but it's a cultural fit. You go to the place you want to work and work as a pilot. It's a massive thing about cultural fit, isn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, it's very, very difficult because the world we look in, we have aviation itself is very male dominated industry. And I know it must be hard, certainly for ladies out there or people with different backgrounds sometimes to get into aviation. I'd like to think that most of us are consummate professionals, and we have no issue with who we work with. If they're capable of doing a job, they're capable of doing a job, and therefore they shouldn't be judged or stereotyped on that. It's still a funny world out there, and I know it comes up for a lot of people on a regular basis, and that it makes me feel sad to hear that. The key thing I think with aviation is if you want to get started and you're passionate about what you do, one of the best things you can do when you get started in aviation is start working at an airfield, start working at a fixed base operator, an FBO, where the corporate jets and the private aircraft come through an airport. That kind of job not only gives you kind of some of the idea of what's involved with these aircraft and what we do day to day, and some of the working hours, because it's not always the most glorious job when you're landing off somewhere at 3 o'clock in the morning for a quick fuel stop before you then continue on for the rest of the night. There's lots of variation in these jobs. It's one of the best ways of meeting people. I know lots of people who have got into FBOs, done FBO jobs for a short period, and it's really helped them not only to provide them with some income while they're doing a modular training route, but also to give them that networking ability to then go meet different people. And many have picked up a job that way, all by meeting people. I'm very lucky that in this job, some days I'll get called up and I might end up in a tiny little GA airfield in the south of France. And then the next day I might end up somewhere in the mountains. The next day I might have to go over to America. It's really a very varied job. But the one thing I absolutely love, and I think I'll always have, is that passion for aviation. And if anyone comes up to me and wants to look at an aeroplane or talk about aeroplanes, I can do it all day long, whether they've got a Piper Cub or whether they want to show me their 777 VIP conversion. Aviation is one of those where it's just nice to share the love and enthusiasm of other people.
Jim, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure.
These questions.
I'm on LinkedIn. If anyone's got any other questions, they want to hear anything more about lifestyle or career choices, then once again, I'm more than happy. Also, if you've got any recommendations of people you'd like me to talk to, always happy, Nick. Always happy.
Thank you, Jimbo. I think the first thing you're going to have to do is